Chapter 1. The Open Road Lila. Rose hummed softly to the radio, her fingers tapping the steering wheel as the golden hues of dusk painted the horizon. The rural highway stretched before her, flanked by swaying pines and fields of wildflowers. At 19, she felt the world was hers to conquer. Her volunteer work at the community center had left her heart full, teaching kids to read, laughing with them over silly drawings. Now she was headed home to her family's modest house in Willow Creek, a small town where everyone knew her name. The song on the radio switched to an upbeat pop tune, and Lila turned up the volume, her auburn curls bouncing as she sang along. Her hazel eyes sparkled with dreams of becoming a teacher, of making a difference. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching her own smile, then froze. Red and blue lights flashed behind her. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't been speeding, had she? Lila eased her foot off the gas, guiding her old Honda to the shoulder. The police cruiser pulled up close, its headlights glaring. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. "It's just a routine stop," she whispered, though her hands trembled as she reached for her license. The officer approached, his silhouette broad and imposing against the fading light. His boots crunched on the gravel, deliberate and slow. Lila lowered her window, forcing a polite smile. "Good evening, officer. Did I do something wrong?" Deputy Carl Hargrove leaned down, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. His cold blue eyes studied her, lingering too long. A smirk tugged at his lips, revealing a glint of malice. "License and registration," he said, his voice gravelly, devoid of warmth. Lila handed over the documents, her fingers brushing the edge of the window. "Was I speeding? I thought I was under the limit." Hargrove didn't answer. He scanned her license, then her face, his smirk widening. "Step out of the vehicle, miss." Her heart skipped. "I'm sorry, sir, but why? I don't understand." "Out, now." His tone sharpened, a blade cutting through her confusion. Lila's mind raced. She'd heard stories, whispers of cops targeting people like her, young and black for no reason. But this was Willow Creek. Things like that didn't happen here. Did they? She unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements slow, and stepped onto the gravel. The evening air was cool, but sweat beaded on her neck. Hargrove towered over her, his badge glinting under the cruiser's lights. "You got anything in the car I should know about?" he asked, circling her like a predator. "No, sir," Lila said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Just my books and some snacks from the community center." He chuckled, low and menacing. "We'll see about that." He motioned to the car. "Open the trunk." Lila hesitated, then complied, her hands shaking as she popped the trunk. It held nothing but a spare tire, a blanket, and her backpack. Hargrove rummaged through it, tossing her belongings carelessly. Then, with a sleight of hand she almost missed, he slipped something small and plastic into the backpack's side pocket. "What's this?" he said, pulling out a baggie of white powder. His voice dripped with mock surprise. Lila's blood ran, cold. "That's not mine," she cried, stepping forward. "You just put that there. I saw you." Hargrove's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You calling me a liar, girl?" He grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. Lila gasped, tears pricking her eyes. "No, I didn't mean," she stammered, but his grip tightened. "You're under arrest," he growled, yanking her toward the cruiser. "Possession of illegal substances, resisting an officer. You're in deep trouble." Panic surged through her. "This isn't right. Please, I didn't do anything." She struggled, but his strength overwhelmed her. He shoved her against the cruiser, cuffing her hands behind her back. The metal bit into her wrists. As he pushed her into the back seat, Lila's mind screamed for answers. Why was he doing this? What did he want? The cruiser's door slammed shut, trapping her in a cage of flashing lights and cold leather. Through the window, she saw her car, abandoned on the roadside, a symbol of the life she'd lost in moments. Hargrove slid into the driver's seat, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. "You should have stayed in your place," he said, his voice laced with venom. The cruiser lurched forward, carrying her into the night. Lila's heart pounded as she fought to stay calm. She thought of her mother's warm smile, her father's strong hug, her little brother's laughter. They'd be waiting for her, unaware of the nightmare unfolding ahead. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she clenched her fists. She didn't know how, but she would survive this. She had to. The road ahead was dark, winding into the unknown. Hargrove's radio crackled with static, a haunting sound that filled the silence. Lila closed her eyes, whispering a prayer, her voice barely audible. "Please, God, get me home." But the night was far from over, and Deputy Hargrove had plans she couldn't yet fathom. Chapter 2. The Trap. The cruiser's tires hummed against the asphalt, a relentless drone that matched the pounding of Lila Rose's heart. The world outside the window blurred into a smear of dark pines and flickering stars, each mile pulling her farther from home. In the back seat, cuffed and helpless, Lila fought to keep her breathing steady. Deputy Carl Hargrove's silhouette filled the driver's seat, his broad shoulders blocking the faint glow of the dashboard. His silence was worse than his earlier taunts, a void that invited her imagination to conjure horrors. "Where are you taking me?" Lila's voice trembled, but she forced the words out. She needed to hear something, anything, to break the oppressive quiet. Hargrove's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, cold and unyielding. "Somewhere you'll learn to behave," he said, his tone flat but laced with menace. The radio crackled, spitting static, but he didn't touch it. Instead, he turned onto a narrow road, the pavement giving way to gravel that crunched under the tires. Lila's mind raced. She'd read about cases like this, people pulled over, detained, and worse, all because of a badge and a grudge. But she wasn't just anyone. She was Lila Rose, daughter of Grace and Samuel, sister to little Eli. She had dreams, a future. She clung to those thoughts like a lifeline, refusing to let fear drown her. The cruiser slowed, and a squat, gray building emerged from the darkness, its single floodlight casting harsh shadows. A faded sign read, "Willow County Holding Facility," but the place looked more like a forgotten warehouse than a jail. No other cars, no signs of life. Lila's stomach churned. This wasn't right. Hargrove parked and stepped out, the night air rushing in as he opened her door. "Move!" he barked, yanking her to her feet. The cuffs dug into her wrists and she stumbled, her sneakers slipping on the gravel. He didn't steady her, just shoved her toward the building's rusted door. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and despair. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like dying insects. Hargrove led her down a short hallway, past empty cells with barred doors. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. Where were the other officers? The other prisoners? Lila's throat tightened as she realized how alone she was. Hargrove stopped at a cell, its interior barely larger than a closet. A metal cot, a chipped sink, and a toilet that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. He uncuffed her, his fingers lingering on her wrist a moment too long, sending a shiver down her spine. "Get comfortable," he said, his smirk returning. "You're gonna be here a while." "This is a mistake," Lila said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a spark of defiance. "I didn't do anything. You planted that bag. People will notice I'm gone, my family, my friends. You can't just—" "Shut up," he snapped, stepping closer. His breath was sour, his eyes narrowing. "You think anyone's coming? For you? Out here? You're nothing but a problem I'm gonna solve." He slammed the cell door, the clang reverberating through her bones. Lila backed against the wall, her knees weak. The lock clicked, and Hargrove's footsteps faded down the hall. Alone, she slid to the floor, hugging her arms around herself. The cold concrete seeped through her jeans, grounding her in the reality of her nightmare. Tears welled up, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help. She needed to think. Her eyes scanned the cell, searching for anything useful. The cot's frame was bolted down, the sink rusted but functional. A small window high on the wall let in a sliver of moonlight, too narrow to climb through. She stood, her legs shaky, and ran her fingers along the walls, hoping for a loose brick, a hidden panel. Anything. Nothing but rough cinder block. A faint creak echoed from the hallway, and Lila froze. Was Hargrove coming back? She pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. The sound grew closer, not the heavy tread of boots, but a softer, shuffling step. A shadow moved across the bars, and an older man appeared, his face weathered and kind. He wore a janitor's uniform, the name Amos stitched on the pocket. "You okay, miss?" he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. Lila hesitated, unsure if she could trust him, but his eyes held no malice, only concern. "No," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't belong here. That officer, he's lying." Amos nodded, as if he'd heard it before. "Hargrove's got a way of making trouble for folks who don't deserve it," he said, his voice low. "Been that way for years. But you gotta stay strong, hear me? Don't let him break you." Lila's breath hitched. "You know him. Has he done this before?" Amos's face darkened. "More than you'd want to know. But I can't say much now. He's still around." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, slipping it through the bars. "Hide this. Might help you later." She took it, her fingers trembling. "What is it?" "No time," Amos said, stepping back as another sound, a door slamming, echoed from the hall. "Stay quiet. I'll be back when I can." He disappeared into the shadows, leaving Lila clutching the note. Her pulse raced as she unfolded it, careful to keep her movements small. The paper was worn, the ink smudged, but the words were clear. "Hargrove's got a stash in his office. Evidence he plants. Find it, and you're free." Below was a crude sketch of a hallway, with an X marking a room labeled office. Lila's heart leaped. Evidence? If she could get to Hargrove's office, she could prove her innocence. But how? She was locked in a cell, in a building that felt like a tomb. She tucked the note into her sock, her mind spinning with possibilities. Amos's kindness was a lifeline, but it came with a weight. If Hargrove caught her with the note, what would he do? The lights flickered, plunging the cell into darkness for a heartbeat before buzzing back on. Lila's breath caught. Was it a power surge or something worse? She strained to listen, catching the faint murmur of voices from the hall. Hargrove's low growl, answered by a younger, nervous voice. Another officer. Her hope flickered, then dimmed. If they worked with Hargrove, they might be just as corrupt. She paced the small cell, her sneakers scuffing the floor. The note burned. Against her ankle, a secret that could save her, or doom her. She thought of her mother, Grace, who'd always told her, "You're stronger than you know, Lila." She thought of her father, Samuel, whose quiet pride in her had carried her through every challenge, and Eli, her 9-year-old brother, who'd be waiting for her to read him bedtime stories. The thought of them brought a lump to her throat, but also a fire to her chest. "I'm getting out of here," she whispered, her voice fierce. "For them." Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time blurred in the cell's dim light. The voices in the hall faded, replaced by an eerie quiet. Lila sat on the cot, her eyes fixed on the window's sliver of moonlight. She was about to close them, exhaustion creeping in, when a new sound jolted her upright, footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Hargrove. He appeared at the bars, his face a mask of cruel amusement. In his hand was a manila folder, thick with papers. "Thought you might like to know what's waiting for you," he said, holding up the folder. "Charges, evidence, witnesses. You're looking at years, girl, unless you cooperate." Lila's blood ran cold. "Cooperate? You mean lie? Admit to something I didn't do?" He chuckled, the sound like gravel underfoot. "Smart mouth, that'll get you nowhere. But I'm a fair man. You play nice. Maybe I go easy on you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Or maybe I don't." Her skin crawled, but she held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "People will find—" "Out!" Hargrove's smile vanished. He slammed the folder against the bars, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Keep talking," he growled. "See how far that gets you." He turned and stalked away, his boots pounding the floor. Lila exhaled, her body trembling. She'd pushed him, and it had cost her. But it had also shown her something. Hargrove wasn't invincible. He was angry, maybe even rattled. That meant he could make mistakes, and mistakes could be her way out. She touched the note in her sock, its edges sharp against her skin. Amos's words echoed in her mind. Stay strong. She would, for her family, for herself, and for every other soul Hargrove had tried to break. The trap was set, but Lila Rose was no one's prey. The moonlight shifted, casting long shadows across the cell. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, a lonely sound that mirrored the ache in her heart. But beneath that ache was a spark, growing, brighter with every breath. She didn't know how, but she would escape. And when she did, Hargrove would pay. Chapter 3. The Rookie's Dilemma. The fluorescent lights in the Willow County holding facility buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, casting a sickly glow over the concrete hallway. Lila Rose sat on the edge of the metal cot in her cell. The note, from Amos, tucked securely in her sock. Its words burned in her mind. Hargrove's got a stash in his office. Evidence he plants. The promise of freedom was tantalizing, but the locked bars before her were a cruel reminder of her reality. She strained to hear any sound beyond the hum of the lights, her heart still racing from Hargrove's earlier threat. The manila folder he'd waved, thick with fabricated charges, loomed in her thoughts like a guillotine. A new sound broke the silence, footsteps, lighter than Hargrove's heavy tread. Lila stood, her pulse quickening, and pressed herself against the wall, peering through the bars. A young man approached, his police uniform crisp but ill-fitting, as if he hadn't grown into it. His face was boyish, with a scattering of freckles, and anxious green eyes that darted down the hall before settling on her. The badge on his chest read, J. Ellis. "You're Lila Rose?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. He glanced over his shoulder again, his fingers fidgeting, with the keys on his belt. Lila nodded, wary. Was this another of Hargrove's games? "Who are you?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Officer Jake Ellis," he said, stepping closer to the bars. I'm new here. Just started last week." His eyes softened as he looked at her, and for a moment, Lila saw something unexpected. Guilt. "You okay? I mean, you don't look like you belong here." Lila's breath caught. Was he fishing for information, or was he genuinely concerned? She decided to test him. "I don't belong here," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Hargrove planted drugs in my car. He's framing me. You know that, don't you?" Jake's face paled, and he took a step back, his hand brushing the wall for support. I don't know anything for sure," he stammered. "Hargrove's my superior. He said you were caught with—" He stopped, swallowing hard, as if the words tasted bitter. "You don't believe him," Lila pressed, sensing a crack in his armor. "You've seen how he is. He's not just doing his job. He's targeting me." Jake's jaw tightened, and he looked away, his eyes fixed on the flickering light above. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," he muttered. "He'll have my badge if he catches me." "Then why are you here?" Lila asked, stepping closer to the bars. Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm, probing. "If you're just following orders, why risk talking to me at all?" Jake's gaze snapped back to her, and for a moment they locked eyes. His were stormy, torn between duty and something deeper, something human. "Because it doesn't feel right," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I saw your file. No record, no priors. You're a college kid volunteering at a community center. And Hargrove? He's got a reputation." Lila's hope flickered, fragile but alive. "What kind of reputation?" she asked, keeping her tone soft, encouraging. Jake hesitated, then leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He's been investigated before. Complaints about targeting people, black folks mostly. Nothing ever sticks, though. He's got friends in high places." He shook his head, frustration etching lines into his young face. "I didn't sign up for this. I wanted to help people, not this." Lila's mind raced. Jake's doubt was her opening, but she had to tread carefully. "Then help me," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "You know I'm innocent. You can do something." Jake's eyes widened, and he took another step back, his hand hovering near his radio. "I can't just let you out," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "Hargrove would know it was me. I'd lose everything, my job, my future. I've got a kid sister to take care of. I can't. I have a family too," Lila cut in, her voice breaking. She thought of her mother's warm hugs, her father's quiet strength, her brother Eli's infectious laugh. "They're waiting for me, probably scared out of their minds. If you let Hargrove get away with this, it's not just me he'll hurt. He'll do it again. You know he will." Jake's face crumpled, and for a moment, Lila thought he might cry. He ran a hand through his sandy hair, pacing a small circle in the hall. "I don't know what to do," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I'm not like him, I'm not." "Then prove it," Lila said, her voice fierce now. She gripped the bars, her knuckles pale. "You don't have to open the cell. Just look the other way. Give me a chance." Before Jake could respond, a loud bang echoed from the end of the hall, a door slamming open. Hargrove's voice boomed, sharp and commanding. "Ellis, where the hell are you?" Jake froze, his face draining of color. "I gotta go," he whispered, his eyes darting to the hall. "I'm sorry." He turned and hurried away, his footsteps fading as Hargrove's grew louder. Lila sank back onto the cot, her heart sinking with him. She'd been so close. Jake's doubt was real, but his fear was stronger. For now. She touched the note in her sock, its edges a reminder of Amos's warning. Stay strong. She would, but the weight of her isolation pressed harder. Hargrove appeared at the bars, his face a storm cloud. "Talking to my rookie, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with suspicion. He leaned in, his breath hot and sour through the bars. "You think you're clever, don't you? Stirring up trouble?" Lila forced herself to meet his gaze, her fear buried beneath a mask of defiance. "I'm just trying to survive," she said, her voice steady. "You're the one making trouble." Hargrove's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she thought he might unlock the cell and drag her out. Instead, he laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent a chill down her spine. "You're gonna regret that mouth," he said, tapping the bars with his knuckles. "Tomorrow, we're taking a little trip, somewhere quieter. Just you and me." Lila's blood ran cold. "A trip?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hargrove's smirk returned, wider and crueler. "You'll see," he said, turning away. "Get some sleep. You'll need it." His boots echoed down the hall, leaving her in silence once more. Panic clawed at her chest, but Lila forced it down. A trip? Somewhere quieter? The words echoed like a death knell. She had to act, and soon. The note from Amos was her only lead, but getting to Hargrove's office seemed impossible. Unless… Jake. He was her key, if she could sway him. Hours dragged by, the cell's dim light unchanging. Lila paced, her mind churning. She replayed Jake's words, his hesitation, his guilt. He wasn't like Hargrove. He was young, scared, but he had a conscience. She could work with that. She had to. A soft clink interrupted her thoughts. She froze, listening. The sound came again from the high window, a pebble tapping against the glass. Lila stood on the cot, stretching to peer out. The window was too small to escape through, but she could just make out a figure in the darkness, a shadow moving in the gravel lot. Amos, or someone else? Her heart leaped as the figure stepped into the faint glow of the floodlight. It was Jake, his face pale and determined. He held up a small object, a key, glinting in the moonlight. He pointed to the side of the building, then mouthed, "Wait." Lila's breath caught. Was he really going to help her? Or was this a trap? Another of Hargrove's cruel games? She watched as Jake disappeared from view, her mind torn between hope and dread. The key could mean freedom, or betrayal. She sat back on the cot, her hands trembling. The note in her sock felt heavier now, a promise and a risk. If Jake was on her side, she had a chance. But if he wasn't, she just walked into a deeper trap. The thought of Hargrove's trip sent a shudder through her. Whatever he had planned, it wasn't justice. Lila closed her eyes, picturing her family's faces. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "You're stronger than you know." She clung to that, letting it fuel her resolve. Jake was her shot, her gamble. And she wasn't going down without a fight. The night stretched on, each second a test of her courage. Somewhere in the building, a clock ticked, counting down to Hargrove's return. Lila's fingers brushed the note, her lifeline. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She was Lila Rose, and she would survive. Chapter 4. The Dark Night. The cell was a cage of shadows, the sliver of moonlight from the high window Lila Rose's only tether to the world outside. She sat on the cot, her fingers tracing the edge of the note hidden in her sock, its words a fragile promise. Hargrove's got a stash in his office, evidence he plants. The image of Jake Ellis holding up the key in the gravel lot burned in her mind, a beacon of hope and a source of dread. Was he truly her ally, or was this another of Deputy Carl Hargrove's traps? The threat of Hargrove's trip tomorrow, somewhere quieter, just the two of them, hung over her like a storm cloud, each tick of the unseen clock tightening, the knot in her chest. Lila's breath hitched as a soft scrape echoed from the hallway, different from the heavy boots of Hargrove or the nervous shuffle of Jake. She stood, pressing herself against the wall, her heart pounding. The sound grew closer, deliberate, like metal brushing concrete. A shadow flickered across the bars, and a low voice whispered, "Miss Lila?" It was Amos, the janitor, his weathered face barely visible in the dim light. He held a mop, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the hall. "You still got that note?" he asked, his voice urgent. Lila nodded, her fingers brushing her sock. "Yes, but how do I get to his office? I'm locked in here." Amos glanced over his shoulder, then leaned closer to the bars. "Boy's coming back," he said, his voice barely audible. "Ellis. He's scared, but he's got a heart. I seen it. You gotta trust him, least for now." "Trust him," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "What if he's working with Hargrove? He could be setting me up." Amos's Eyes softened, but his tone was firm. Sometimes you gotta take a leap, child. Jake's new, don't know the game yet. Hargrove's been at this too long. Makes mistakes when he's cocky. Use that. He slipped a small, rusted nail file through the bars, its edges dull, but sharp enough for purpose. For the cuffs, if it comes to it. Hide it good. Lila took the file, her hands shaking as she tucked it into her sleeve. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with gratitude. Why are you helping me? Amos's face darkened, a shadow of old pain crossing his features. Lost someone to a man like Hargrove long time ago. Ain't let it happen again. Before she could ask more, he stepped back, his mop scraping the floor as he moved down the hall, disappearing into the gloom. Lila's mind raced. Amos's words confirmed what Jake had hinted at. Hargrove's history of targeting people, of destroying lives. The nail file was a small weapon, but it felt like a sword in her hands. She sat back on the cot, her thoughts swirling. Jake was her key, but trust was a gamble. If she misjudged him, she'd pay dearly. The night deepened, the facility's silence broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. Lila's eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion tugging at her, but fear kept her alert. She couldn't afford to sleep, not with Hargrove's threat looming. She paced the cell, her sneakers scuffing the concrete, each step a battle to stay strong. Her family's faces flashed in her mind, her mother Grace's warm smile, her father Samuel's steady gaze, her brother Eli's giggle. They were her anchor, her reason to fight. A new sound jolted her, a key turning in a lock, not her cell, but somewhere down the hall. She froze, listening. Footsteps approached, light and hesitant. Jake's face appeared at the bars, his green eyes wide with a mix of determination and terror. In his hand was the key she'd seen earlier, glinting like a promise. Lila, he whispered, his voice barely audible. We don't have much time. Hargrove's in his office, but he's drinking. He'll be out for a bit, but not long. Lila's heart leaped, but caution held her back. Why are you doing this? She asked, stepping closer to the bars. You said you couldn't risk your job, your sister. What's changed? Jake's jaw clenched, and he looked away, his fingers tightening around the key. I keep seeing my sister's face, he said, his voice breaking. She's your age. If someone did this to her, I'd want someone to help. I can't just stand by. Lila searched his eyes, looking for deceit, but found only raw honesty. It was enough, for now. Okay, she said, her voice steady. What's the plan? Jake glanced down the hall, then unlocked the cell door, the click echoing like a gunshot in the silence. Hargrove's office is at the end of the hall, he said, keeping his voice low. There's a cabinet where he keeps stuff. Evidence, maybe. If we can find it, you can prove he planted the drugs. But we gotta be quick. Lila stepped out of the cell, her legs shaky but her resolve ironclad. The hallway stretched before her, a gauntlet of flickering lights and unseen dangers. What if he catches us? She asked, her voice a whisper. Jake's face paled, but he met her gaze. Then we're both done. But I'm in this now. No turning back. They moved silently, Jake leading the way, his hand hovering near his radio as if expecting Hargrove's voice to crackle through. Lila's heart pounded, the nail file in her sleeve a small comfort. The note in her sock guided her, its sketch, vivid in her mind. The hall seemed to stretch forever, each step amplifying her fear and hope. They reached a heavy door marked Office, its paint peeling like dead skin. Jake hesitated, his hand on the knob. If he's in there, he started, but Lila cut him off. We don't have a choice, she said, her voice fierce. Open it. Jake nodded, his face set with resolve, and turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a cluttered room lit by a single desk lamp. Papers were strewn across the desk, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside them. No Hargrove. Lila's breath caught. Relief, but only for a moment. "Over there," Jake whispered, pointing to a metal cabinet in the corner. Its lock was flimsy, rusted with age. Lila moved toward it, her fingers trembling as she tugged at the handle. It didn't budge. "Try this," Jake said, handing her a paperclip he'd bent into a makeshift pick. Lila worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The lock clicked, and the cabinet door swung open, revealing a chaos of files, baggies, and small vials, Hargrove's stash. Lila's heart soared as she grabbed a baggie identical to the one Hargrove had planted in her car. "This is it," she whispered, holding it up. "Proof." Before Jake could respond, a low chuckle filled the room, freezing them both. Hargrove stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking the exit, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Well, ain't this a sight?" he said, his voice slurred but sharp. "My rookie and my prisoner digging through my things." Lila's blood ran cold, the baggie slipping from her fingers. Jake stepped in front of her, his hand on his holster, but his voice shook. "This isn't right, Hargrove. She's innocent. I know what you've been doing." Hargrove's smirk widened, and he drew his gun, the barrel gleaming under the lamp. "You think you're a hero, Ellis? You're just a kid who's in way over his head." He stepped closer, his gaze shifting to Lila. "And you, I told you to behave. Now you're gonna see what happens when you don't." Lila's mind screamed for a plan, her eyes darting to the nail file in her sleeve, the open cabinet, the whiskey bottle. She had seconds, maybe less. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The lamp." Jake's eyes flicked to hers, understanding dawning. He lunged for the desk, grabbing the lamp and hurling it at Hargrove. The room plunged into darkness as the bulb shattered, and Lila dove for the whiskey bottle, smashing it against the cabinet. The sharp scent of alcohol filled the air, a distraction as she grabbed the baggie again. "Run!" Jake shouted, shoving her toward the door. Hargrove roared, his gun firing blindly, the shot deafening in the small room. Lila's ears rang, but she ran, Jake behind her, their footsteps pounding the hall. They burst into the night, the gravel lot cold and unforgiving. Underfoot. The floodlight blinded her, but she kept moving, the baggie clutched in her hand. Hargrove's shouts followed, his boots crunching behind them. The woods loomed ahead, dark and dense, a chance, however slim. "Keep going," Jake panted, his voice strained. Lila glanced back, her heart lurching as she saw blood on his arm. He'd been hit. "Jake, you're hurt," she cried, slowing. "No time," he gasped, pushing her forward. "Get to the woods. Hide. I'll hold him off." Lila's throat tightened, tears burning her eyes. "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice fierce. "You have to," Jake said, his eyes locking with hers. "For your family. Go." With a sob, Lila turned and ran. The baggie, her only proof, her only hope. The woods swallowed her, branches clawing at her skin as Hargrove's shouts grew fainter. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to survive, for her family, for Jake, for herself. The night was dark, but Lila Rose was a spark, burning brighter with every step. Chapter 5. Allies in the shadows. The woods swallowed Lila Rose whole, their dense branches clawing at her skin as she stumbled through the darkness. The baggie of planted evidence, her only proof against Deputy Carl Hargrove, was clutched tightly in her hand, its plastic edges cutting into her palm. Her lungs burned, each breath a struggle against the damp, pine-scented air. Behind her, Jake Ellis's pained shout echoed, followed by the crack of another gunshot. Lila's heart lurched. She'd left him behind, wounded, to face Hargrove. Alone. Guilt gnawed at her, but his words rang clear. "For your family. Go." The night was a maze of shadows, the moon's faint light barely piercing the canopy. Lila's sneakers sank into the muddy earth, slowing her as she pushed deeper into the forest. Hargrove's bellows grew fainter, but his pursuit was relentless, a predator's instinct driving him. She didn't know where she was going, only that stopping meant capture, or worse. The nail file Amos had given her pressed against her wrist, a small reassurance in her sleeve. The note in her sock, with its promise of Hargrove's downfall, fueled her resolve. Her foot caught on a root, and she stumbled, catching herself against a tree. Pain shot through her ankle, but she bit back a cry, listening. The woods were alive, with sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, the distant howl of a dog, but no footsteps. Had she lost him? She crouched low, her breath shallow, and scanned the darkness. A faint glow flickered through the trees, not Hargrove's flashlight, but something softer, warmer. A house. Hope surged, fragile but fierce. Lila crept toward the by, light, her movements cautious. The baggie was her lifeline, but it wouldn't mean anything if Hargrove caught her. The glow grew brighter, revealing a small cabin nestled in a clearing, its windows aglow with lamplight. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a rusted truck sat in the driveway. It looked like salvation, but Lila hesitated. Who lived here? Could she trust them? A twig snapped behind her and she spun, her heart in her throat. Nothing but darkness. She couldn't wait. She sprinted to the cabin's porch, her breath ragged, and knocked softly, praying for kindness. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her 50s, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes sharp but warm. She wore a quilted jacket, and her hands were calloused, as if accustomed to hard work. "Who are you?" the woman asked, her voice steady but cautious. Her gaze flicked to Lila's torn clothes, the mud on her face, the desperation in her eyes. "Please," Lila whispered, her voice breaking. "I need help. I'm being chased by a cop. He's trying to frame me." The woman's eyes narrowed, but not with suspicion, with recognition. "Get inside," she said, stepping aside. "Quick." Lila slipped into the cabin, the warmth of a crackling fire enveloping her. The room was modest, with worn furniture and family photos lining the walls. The woman shut the door, locking it, and gestured to a chair. "Sit. You're shaking." "I'm Maria." "Lila," she said, sinking into the chair, her body trembling from cold and fear. She clutched the baggie, unsure whether to reveal it. "Thank you. I didn't know where else to go." Maria studied her, then handed her a mug of steaming tea. "You said a cop's after you. Hargrove?" Lila's breath caught. "You know him?" Maria's face darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Too well," she said, sitting across from Lila. "He cost me someone I loved. My brother years ago. Framed him, just like you. He didn't make it out." Her voice cracked, but she straightened, her eyes fierce. "You're not alone, Lila. Not tonight." Lila's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. Maria's pain mirrored her own fear, but her strength was a beacon. "He planted this," Lila said, holding up the baggie. "I got it from his office. It's proof he's framing people. But he's still after me. And Jake, the rookie who helped me escape, he's hurt." Maria's eyes widened, but she nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll figure this out. First, we need to hide you. Hargrove knows these woods. He'll come looking." She stood, moving to a closet and pulling out a blanket and a first aid kit. "You hurt anywhere?" "Just my ankle," Lila said, wincing as she touched it, twisted it running. Maria knelt, examining Lila's ankle with gentle hands. "Not broken, just sprained. Rest it for now." She handed Lila the blanket, her voice softening. "You remind me of my daughter. She's about your age. Got the same fire in her eyes." Lila managed a small smile, the warmth of Maria's words easing the ache in her chest. "My family. They don't know where I am. They must be so scared." "They're your strength," Maria said, squeezing her hand. "Hold on to that. We'll get you back to them." A loud crack of thunder shook the cabin, and rain began to patter against the windows, a storm rolling in. Lila's heart sank. Rain would make the woods treacherous, but it might also slow Hargrove. She sipped the tea, its warmth grounding her, and glanced at the photos on the wall. One showed a young man, smiling, with Maria's eyes. Her brother, Lila realized, her heart aching for Maria's loss. "Maria," Lila said, her voice hesitant. "What happened to your brother?" Maria's gaze drifted to the photo, her expression heavy. "Hargrove stopped him one night, just like you. Planted drugs, said he resisted. They locked him up and he didn't survive the jail." "Official." "Report said accident, but I know better." Her voice hardened. "I've been watching Hargrove ever since, gathering what I can. Letters, complaints from others he's hurt. Never enough to take him down, but enough to know you're not his first." Lila's fingers tightened around the baggie. "This could be enough," she said, her voice fierce. "If I can get it to the right people." Maria nodded, but her eyes flicked to the window, where rain now poured in sheets. "We need a plan. Hargrove's not stupid. He'll check every house in these woods. And if your friend Jake's hurt..." Lila's heart clenched. Jake had risked everything for her, and she'd left him bleeding. "We have to help him," she said, standing despite the pain in her ankle. "He's out there because of me." Maria grabbed her arm, gentle but firm. "You're no good to him if you're caught. Stay here. I know these woods better than..." "Hargrove, I'll look for him." Before Lila could protest, a pounding on the door made them both freeze. "Open up!" Hargrove's voice boomed, slurred but unmistakable. "I know you're in there, girl." Lila's blood ran cold, her eyes darting to Maria. The older woman's face was calm, but her hands moved quickly, shoving Lila toward a narrow staircase. "Upstairs, under the bed." "Now," she whispered, grabbing a shotgun from the closet. Lila scrambled up the stairs, her ankle throbbing, and slid under a low bed in a small room, the baggie still in her hand. Her heart pounded as she heard the door creak open below, Hargrove's voice filling the cabin like poison. "Maria, don't play games. Hand her over, or this gets ugly." "You're on my property, Carl," Maria said, her voice steady as steel. "You got no warrant, no right. Get out." Lila held her breath, the nail file in her sleeve a cold comfort. She could hear Hargrove's boots on the floor, the creak of wood as he moved closer to Maria. "You think you can protect her?" he growled. "You're just like your brother, too stubborn for your own good." A loud crash, furniture overturning, made Lila flinch. Maria's voice rang out, sharp and fearless. "Back off, or I swear I'll shoot." The storm roared. Outside, thunder drowning out Hargrove's reply. Lila's mind raced. She couldn't let Maria face him alone. She crawled out from under the bed, gripping the nail file, and crept to the top of the stairs. Below, Hargrove had Maria pinned against the wall, the shotgun on the floor. His gun was raised, his face twisted with rage. Lila's heart stopped, but her body moved. She flew down the stairs, the nail file raised, and drove it into Hargrove's arm. He roared, dropping the gun, and Maria shoved him back, grabbing the shotgun. "Get out!" Maria shouted, leveling the barrel at him. Hargrove staggered, clutching, his arm, his eyes blazing with fury. "This ain't over," he snarled, backing toward the door. "You're both dead." He stumbled into the rain, his silhouette vanishing into the storm. Lila collapsed against the wall, her body shaking. Maria lowered the shotgun, her face pale but resolute. "You're braver than you know," she said, pulling Lila into a hug. "But we're not safe yet. We need to move." Lila nodded, her mind reeling. Jake was still out there, wounded. Hargrove was coming back. But Maria's arms around her felt like her mother's, and for a moment, she let herself believe she could make it home. The baggie in her hand was her proof, her hope, and she wasn't alone anymore. The storm raged on, a mirror to the battle within her. Lila Rose was still a spark, burning brighter in the dark. Chapter 6. The Breakout. The storm raged outside Maria's cabin, rain hammering the roof like a drumbeat of war. Lila Rose stood trembling, the baggie of planted evidence gripped tightly in her hand, its plastic slick with sweat. Her heart still. Raced from the confrontation with Deputy Carl Hargrove, his furious promise, "You're both dead," echoing in her mind. Maria's arms, strong and steady, had felt like a lifeline, but the danger was far from over. Jake Ellis was out there, wounded, maybe dying, and Hargrove was coming back. Lila's sprained ankle throbbed, but the fire in her chest burned hotter. She had to keep moving, for her family, for Jake, for herself. Maria locked the cabin door, her face set with grim determination. The shotgun rested against the wall, its barrel glinting in the firelight. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice low but firm. "Hargrove knows where you are. He'll bring others, his kind of..." "Others?" Lila's stomach twisted. "Others? You mean more cops like him?" Maria nodded, her eyes dark with memory. "He's got a few in his pocket. Not all, but enough to make trouble. We need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can get that. Evidence," she nodded at the baggie, "to people who will listen." Lila's mind raced. "My family," she said, her voice cracking. "They're in Willow Creek. My mom, my dad, my brother. They'll know what to do. But it's miles away, and Jake," she trailed off, guilt flooding her. Jake had risked everything to help her escape the holding facility, and now he was bleeding in the woods. Maria placed a hand on Lila's shoulder, her touch grounding. "We'll find him," she said. "I know these woods. If he's alive, we'll get him. But we move now, before Hargrove rallies his dogs." Lila nodded, swallowing her fear. She tucked the baggie into her jacket pocket, zipping it shut, and slipped the nail file from her sleeve into her other pocket. Maria handed her a raincoat, too big but warm, and grabbed a flashlight and a small backpack. "Stay close," Maria said, opening the back door. The storm's roar filled the cabin, rain lashing the porch like a curtain. They stepped into the deluge, the cold water soaking Lila instantly. The woods loomed, dark and impenetrable, the flashlight's beam barely cutting through the downpour. Maria led the way, her steps sure despite the mud. Lila limped behind, her ankle protesting with every step, but she gritted her teeth. She thought of her mother's voice. "You're stronger than you know." It was her mantra now, pushing her forward. The forest was a labyrinth, branches snapping at their faces, roots threatening to trip them. Maria moved like she'd been born in these woods, navigating by instinct. "There's a trail up ahead," she whispered over the storm. "Leads to an old hunting cabin. If Jake's smart, he's headed there to hide." Lila's heart clung to that hope, but doubt gnawed at her. What if Jake wasn't smart? What if he was already? She shook the thought away, focusing on Maria's back, the flashlight's beam. The rain masked their footsteps, but it also hid Hargrove. He could be anywhere. A faint groan broke through the storm's din, stopping them cold. Maria swung the flashlight, its beam catching a slumped figure against a tree. Jake. His uniform was soaked, blood staining his sleeve, his face pale under the rain. "Jake!" Lila cried, rushing to him despite her ankle's scream. He looked up, his green eyes glassy but alive. "Lila," he rasped, a weak smile flickering. "You made it." "Barely," she said, kneeling beside him, tears mixing with the rain. "You're hurt. We need to get you out of here." Maria crouched, checking Jake's arm. "Bullet grazed you," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "You're losing blood, but you'll live if we move fast." She pulled a bandage from her backpack, wrapping it tightly around his wound. Jake winced, but didn't complain. "Can't stay here," Maria said, scanning the darkness. "Hargrove's close. I can feel it." As if summoned, A flashlight beam sliced through the trees, followed by Hargrove's voice, slurred but vicious. "Ellis, you traitor! You think you can run from me?" The beam swept closer, and Lila's heart froze. He was less than 100. "Yards away! Move!" Maria hissed, helping Jake to his feet. Lila supported his other side, her ankle screaming as they stumbled toward the trail. The hunting cabin was their only hope, a faint outline in the distance, its roof sagging under the rain's weight. They reached it, the door hanging ajar, its hinges rusted. Inside, the air was musty, the floor littered with leaves and broken glass. Maria propped Jake against the wall, his breathing shallow. "Stay here," she said, handing Lila the flashlight. "I'll scout the perimeter. If Hargrove's close, we need to know." Lila nodded, her hands trembling as she knelt beside Jake. "You're gonna be okay," she said, her voice fierce, as much for herself as for him. "You hear me? We're getting out of this." Jake managed a nod, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have stood up to him sooner. I was scared." "You're here now," Lila said, squeezing his hand. "That's what matters." His hand was cold, but his grip was strong, and for a moment she felt a spark. Not romance, not yet, but a bond forged in shared defiance. A loud crack outside made Lila jump, the flashlight beam darting to the door. Maria burst in, her face grim. "He's here," she whispered, "and he's not alone. 2 others, maybe more." Lila's blood ran cold. "What do we do?" Maria's eyes flicked to the baggie in Lila's pocket. "That evidence is your ticket out. We need to get it to someone who can use it, a lawyer, a reporter, anyone not in Hargrove's pocket. There's a ranger station a few miles east. If we can get there, they've got a radio." "But Jake can't walk that far," Lila said, her voice trembling. "And Hargrove's too close." Maria's jaw tightened. "Then we make a stand here. Buy time." She grabbed a broken chair, wedging it against the door, and handed Lila a rusted hunting knife from her backpack. "Just in case." Lila's heart pounded, the knife heavy in her hand. She wasn't a fighter, but she'd learned something tonight. She was a survivor. She thought of her family, of Maria's brother, of every soul Hargrove had crushed. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let's do this." The storm's roar masked the approaching footsteps, but Hargrove's voice cut through like a blade. "You can't hide forever," he shouted, his flashlight beam dancing across the cabin's cracked windows. A second beam joined it, then a third. 3 against 3, but Jake was wounded, and Lila's ankle was a liability. Maria positioned herself by the window, shotgun ready. "Stay low," she whispered. "When they come, we hit hard and fast." Lila nodded, crouching beside Jake, the knife in one hand, the baggie in the other. Her mind raced for a plan. The cabin was a trap, but it was also a choke point. Hargrove and his men would have to come through the door or windows. If they could hold them off, even for a few minutes. A loud bang shook the door, Hargrove's fist pounding the wood. "Open up, or I burn this place down," he roared. Lila's heart stopped. Fire? In this rain? But the menace in his voice made it real. Jake grabbed her arm, his voice weak but urgent. "The floorboards," he rasped, pointing to a loose plank beneath them. "There's a crawl space. I saw it when we came in. You can get out, get to the ranger station." Lila's eyes widened. "I'm not leaving you," she said, echoing her earlier vow. "You have to," Jake said, his eyes fierce despite his pain. "That baggie's bigger than us. It's justice. Go." Maria nodded, her face grim. "He's right. I'll hold them here. You run, Lila. Don't look back." Tears burned Lila's eyes, but she nodded, prying up the floorboard with the knife. The crawl space was dark, damp, barely wide enough for her to fit. She looked at Jake, then Maria, their faces etched with resolve. "I'll come back for you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Go, Maria said, cocking the shotgun as the door splintered under another blow. Lila slid into the crawlspace, the baggie and knife clutched tight. The dirt was cold against her skin, the air thick with mold. She crawled, her ankles screaming, as Hargrove's shouts and the storm's roar faded above. The crawlspace led to a small hatch, barely visible in the dark. She pushed it open, rain flooding in, and emerged into the woods, the ranger station her only goal. Behind her, a gunshot rang out, followed by Maria's shout. Lila's heart clenched, but she ran, the baggie her lifeline, her family her beacon. The storm was her ally now, hiding her tracks. But Hargrove was still out there, and her friends were fighting for her freedom. Lila Rose was no longer just a girl. She was a force, and she would not stop. Chapter 7. The Stranger's Haven. The rain was a relentless curtain, soaking Lila Rose to the bone as she stumbled through the woods, the baggie of planted evidence zipped tightly in her jacket pocket. The storm's roar drowned out the echoes of gunshots from the hunting cabin, where Maria and Jake were holding off Deputy Carl Hargrove and his men. Lila's heart ached with every step, guilt clawing at her for leaving them behind, but Jake's words burned in her mind. That baggie's bigger than us. It's justice. Her sprained ankle throbbed, the nail file in her pocket a small comfort, but she pushed forward, driven by the thought of her family, her mother Grace, her father Samuel, her brother Eli, waiting for her in Willow Creek. Woods seemed endless, a maze of twisted branches and slick mud. The ranger station Maria had mentioned was her only hope, a chance to radio for help and expose Hargrove's corruption. But the storm was a double-edged sword, hiding her tracks while slowing her down. Lightning cracked, illuminating the trees in stark white, and Lila's breath caught as she spotted a faint path winding east. She followed it, her sneakers sinking into the mire, her body trembling from cold and fear. After what felt like hours, a small building emerged through the rain, a ranger station, its windows dark but intact. Lila's heart leaped, but caution held her back. Hargrove had allies. What if they'd gotten here first? She crept closer, peering through a window. The station was empty, its radio on a desk, a faint hum of static cutting through the storm's din. She tried the door, locked. Her fingers shook as she pulled the nail file from her pocket, its rusted edge barely suited for picking a lock, but she had no choice. She worked at it, her hands numb, until the lock clicked open. Inside, the air was musty but dry, a relief after the deluge. Lila locked the door behind her and rushed to the radio, her fingers fumbling with the dials. Static crackled, then a voice, faint but clear. "This is Willow Creek Dispatch. Identify yourself." "Lila Rose," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm at the ranger station off County Road 17. I need help. Deputy Carl Hargrove. He's framing me, planting evidence." "I have proof. Please, send someone." The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "Stay where you are, Ms. Rose. I'm sending a unit. Can you confirm your location?" Lila repeated the details, her heart pounding. She'd done it. She'd reached out. But the radio's static flared again, and a new voice cut through, low and menacing. "Lila, you think you're clever?" Hargrove. "I'm listening, girl. You ain't getting far." Lila's blood ran cold. How had he accessed the radio? She dropped the microphone, backing away, her eyes darting to the windows. The storm's roar masked any sound of approach, but she knew he was close. She clutched the baggie, its contents her only leverage, and scanned the room for a weapon. A fire poker leaned against the wall. She grabbed it, its weight grounding her. A loud bang shook the door, and Lila stifled a scream. "Open up, Lila!" Hargrove's voice was a snarl, slurred from drink but sharp with rage. "You're only making this worse." Lila's mind raced. The station was a trap now, just like the cabin. She needed another way out. Her eyes fell on a small hatch in the floor, a storage cellar maybe. She pried it open, revealing a dark, narrow space. It was her only chance. She slid inside, pulling the hatch shut just as the door splintered under Hargrove's boot. Cellar was cold, damp and cramped, the air thick with the scent of earth. Lila crouched, the fire poker in one hand, the baggie in the other, her breath shallow. Above, Hargrove's boots thudded, his curses echoing through the floorboards. "You can't hide forever," he roared, overturning furniture. Glass shattered, and Lila flinched, her heart pounding. Minutes passed, each one an eternity. Hargrove's footsteps stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. Had he left? Or was he waiting? Lila's fingers tightened around the poker, her mind flashing to Maria and Jake. Were they still alive? The guilt was a knife in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had to survive, for them. A soft creak broke the silence. Not Hargrove, but lighter, cautious. Lila held her breath, listening. The hatch above opened, and a face appeared. Not Hargrove, but a woman, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes wide with concern. "Lila," she whispered. "I'm Sarah. Maria sent me." Lila's heart leaped, but suspicion held her back. "How do you know Maria?" she asked, her voice low. "She's my aunt," Sarah said, her voice steady. "She got word to me through a neighbor's CB radio. Said you're in trouble, and Hargrove's after you. Come on, we need to move." Lila hesitated, then climbed out, the fire poker still in hand. Sarah was young, maybe late 20s, with a no-nonsense air. She wore a raincoat and carried a flashlight, its beam cutting through the station's gloom. "Maria and Jake, they're okay?" Lila asked, her voice trembling. Sarah's face tightened. "They're holding out. Maria's tough, and Jake's tougher than he looks. But Hargrove's got men scouring the woods. We need to get you to Willow Creek, to the sheriff's office. There's a deputy there, Ramirez, who's not in Hargrove's pocket." Lila nodded, relief and fear warring within her. She followed Sarah out a back window, the rain soaking them as they slipped into the woods. Sarah moved quickly, her flashlight guiding them through the storm. "Maria told me about the baggie," Sarah said over the wind. "If we get it to Ramirez, he can start an investigation. Hargrove's been dodging accountability for years." Lila's ankle screamed with every step, but she kept pace, driven by the thought of her family. "My parents," she said. "They're in Willow Creek. They'll be looking for me." Sarah glanced back, her expression softening. "We'll get you to them. I promise." They moved in silence, the storm their only cover. Lila's mind churned with images of her mother's worried face, her father's steady hands, Eli's hopeful eyes. She clutched the baggie, its contents her ticket home. But Hargrove's voice on the radio haunted her. He was close, maybe closer than they knew. A sudden shout broke through the rain, not Hargrove's but another man's, sharp and commanding. "Over there!" A flashlight beam swept the trees, catching Sarah's raincoat. Lila's heart stopped. Hargrove's men. "Run!" Sarah hissed, grabbing Lila's arm. They sprinted, branches tearing at their clothes, the beam closing in. Lila's ankle buckled, and she stumbled, pain shooting through her leg. Sarah pulled her up, her strength surprising for her slight frame. "Keep going," she urged. They reached a small ravine, its banks slick with mud. Sarah shoved Lila down, covering her with her body as the beam passed overhead. "Stay still," Sarah whispered, her breath warm against Lila's ear. The men's voices faded, their footsteps lost in the storm. Lila's chest heaved, tears mixing with the rain. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just want to go home." Sarah squeezed her shoulder, her eyes fierce. "You will. You're stronger than you know, Lila. My aunt saw it. Jake saw it, and I see it now. You're not just running, you're fighting." Lila's throat tightened, Sarah's words echoing her mother's. She nodded, wiping her face. "Okay, let's keep moving." They climbed out of the ravine, the ranger station a distant shadow. Sarah led the way, her flashlight dimming as the batteries weakened. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but Lila felt a shift within her. Sarah's belief, Maria's sacrifice, Jake's courage. They were her strength now, alongside her family's love. As they neared the edge of the woods, a new sound cut through the rain. Sirens, faint but growing louder. Lila's heart leapt. The dispatcher? Ramirez? Or Hargrove's allies? Sarah grabbed her hand, her eyes scanning the darkness. "We're close," she said, "but we're not safe yet." Lila clutched the baggie, her resolve hardening. She was Lila Rose, and she was almost home. But the sirens were a double-edged sword, and Hargrove's shadow loomed large. The fight wasn't over. Chapter 8. The Pursuit Closes. In. The sirens wailed through the storm, their red and blue pulses slicing through the rain-soaked woods where Lila Rose and Sarah crouched. Lila's heart hammered, the baggie of planted evidence a heavy weight in. Her jacket pocket, its plastic edges her lifeline to justice against Deputy Carl Hargrove. The sirens could mean salvation, Deputy Ramirez, the one honest cop Sarah trusted, or they could be Hargrove's corrupt allies, closing in to silence. Sarah's hand gripped Lila's, her eyes scanning the darkness, her flashlight dim but steady. "We're almost to Willow Creek," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Stay sharp." Lila nodded, her sprained ankle throbbing. With every step, but her resolve burned brighter than the pain. Her family, her mother Grace, Father Samuel, and brother Eli, were so close, their love pulling her through the nightmare. The thought of their worried faces fueled her, but so did the guilt of leaving Maria and Jake behind, fighting Hargrove at the hunting cabin. The baggie was her proof, her weapon, but it meant nothing if she didn't survive. They moved through the woods, the path widening as it neared the outskirts of Willow Creek. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the mud clung to Lila's sneakers, slowing her. Sarah led the way, her movements precise like someone who'd navigated these woods her whole life. "The sheriff's office is a mile ahead," Sarah said, glancing back. "Ramirez will be there. He's been after Hargrove for years," Lila's hope flickered, but fear kept it in check. Hargrove's voice on the ranger station radio, "You ain't getting far," haunted her. He was out there, wounded, but relentless, his arm bleeding from her nail file attack at Maria's cabin. "What if he's already there?" Lila asked, her voice trembling. "He knew I called for help." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then we fight. You've got that baggie, and I've got your back. We're not alone anymore." Before Lila could respond, a low growl cut through the night. Not thunder, but an engine. Headlights flashed through. The trees. A police cruiser barreling down a dirt road parallel to their path. Lila's heart stopped. "Down!" Sarah hissed, pulling her behind a fallen log. They pressed into the mud, the cruiser's lights sweeping over them, its tires crunching gravel. "That's not Ramirez," Sarah whispered, her eyes narrowing. "Hargrove's men. Stay low." Lila's breath hitched, her fingers clutching. The baggie. The cruiser slowed, its spotlight scanning the woods. A voice crackled over its radio, too faint to make out, but the tone was urgent. Lila's mind raced. Had Hargrove found Maria and Jake? Were they hurt, or worse? The guilt was a weight, but Sarah's steady presence anchored her. The cruiser moved on, its taillights fading, and Sarah stood, helping Lila up. "We can't wait," she said. "They're circling. We need to get to the sheriff's office." Before they cut us off, they ran, Lila's ankles screaming, her lungs burning. The woods gave way to a residential street, Willow Creek's familiar houses looming through the mist. Lila's heart leaped. She knew these streets, had walked them her whole life. Her family's house was only a few blocks away, but the sheriff's office was closer, and the baggie demanded justice first. As they neared the office, a small brick building with a single floodlight, another set of headlights appeared, this time from the opposite direction. A second cruiser screeched to a stop, blocking their path. Lila froze as a man stepped out. Not Hargrove, but a deputy with a lean face and cold eyes, his badge glinting. "Stop right there," he said, his hand on his gun. "Lila Rose, you're under arrest." Lila's blood ran cold. "No," she said, stepping back. "You're with Hargrove. I know what he's doing, planting evidence, framing people. I have proof." She held up the baggie, her voice fierce despite her fear. The deputy's eyes flicked to the baggie, his smirk chilling. "That's stolen property," he said, advancing. "Hand it over, and maybe we go easy on you." Sarah stepped in front of Lila, her flashlight raised like a club. "Back off, Turner," she snapped. "Ramirez is on his way. You touch her, you're done." Turner laughed, but his eyes darted to the shadows, as if expecting Ramirez. Lila's hopes surged. Sarah wasn't bluffing. But Turner drew his gun, his voice low. "You're out of your league, Sarah. Give me the girl or—" A loud shout interrupted him, not from the woods, but from the sheriff's office. "Turner, stand down!" A new figure emerged, a broad-shouldered man with a stern face and a badge that read, "Ramirez." His gun was drawn, aimed at Turner. "Drop it! Now!" Turner hesitated, his smirk faltering, then lowered his gun, raising his hands. "You're making a mistake, Ramirez," he growled. "Hargrove's got this town locked down." "Not anymore," Ramirez said, his voice steel. He nodded to Lila. "Ms. Rose, you're safe now. Come with me." Lila's legs trembled, relief flooding her, but she didn't move. "My friends," she said, her voice breaking. "Maria and Jake. They're at a hunting cabin fighting Hargrove. He's got men with him. Please, you have to help them." Ramirez's eyes softened, but his tone was urgent. "We got a call from a CB radio about a disturbance in the woods. I've got units headed there. Give me that evidence and we'll take it from here." Lila hesitated, her fingers tightening around the baggie. She'd fought too hard to let it go. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice firm. "I need to know they're okay." Ramirez frowned, but Sarah nodded. "She's earned it," Sarah said. "Let her see this through." Before Ramirez could argue, a roar of engines cut through the night. Another cruiser, this one careening toward them, its headlights blinding. Lila's heart stopped as Hargrove leaned out the window, his face twisted with rage, blood soaking his sleeve. "You're mine, Lila," he bellowed, raising a gun. Ramirez shoved Lila and Sarah behind a parked car, returning fire. Bullets pinged off metal, and Lila crouched, her heart pounding. Sarah grabbed her hand, her eyes fierce. "Stay with me," she said, pulling Lila toward the sheriff's office. They stumbled inside, Ramirez covering their retreat. The office was a chaos of ringing phones and shouting deputies, but Ramirez's voice cut through. "Lock it down," he ordered, slamming the door. "Hargrove's gone rogue. Get back up now." Lila's chest heaved, her eyes darting to the baggie. She handed it to Ramirez, her voice trembling. "This is what he planted in my car. There's more in his office at the holding facility. He's been doing this for years." Ramirez took the baggie, his expression grim. "We'll get it tested, and we'll search his office. You've done good, Lila. Now stay here." Lila shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I need to know about Maria and Jake. And my family, they're close. I have to see them." Ramirez hesitated, then nodded. "Sarah, take her to her family's house. I'll send a unit to escort you. We'll handle Hargrove." Sarah nodded, guiding Lila out a back door to a waiting patrol car. The officer, a young woman with kind eyes, drove them through Willow Creek's quiet streets, the sirens fading behind them. Lila's heart raced as they neared her family's house, its porch light a beacon in the dark. The car stopped, and Lila bolted out, ignoring her ankle's pain. The front door flew open, and her mother, Grace, ran to her, tears streaming down her face. "Lila!" she cried, pulling her into a crushing hug. Her father, Samuel, was right behind, his strong arms enveloping them both, and Eli, her little brother, clung to her legs, sobbing. "I'm here," Lila whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm home." But the moment was cut short by a crack of gunfire in the distance, back toward the sheriff's office. Lila's heart clenched. Hargrove. He wasn't done. She looked at her family, their faces etched with worry, and knew she couldn't stay, not yet. "I have to go back," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "Hargrove's still out there, and my friends need me." Grace's eyes widened, but Samuel nodded, his voice proud. "You're our fighter, Lila. Do what you need to do. We'll be here." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "I'm with you," she said, and the officer nodded, starting the car. Lila took one last look at her family, their love her anchor, and climbed back into the car. The baggie was with Ramirez, but Hargrove was her shadow, and the fight was far from over. She was Lila Rose, and she would see this through. Chapter 9. The Final Stand. The patrol car's engine hummed as Lila Rose sat in the back seat, her heart pounding with a mix of resolve and dread. The fleeting warmth of her family's embrace, her mother Grace's tears, her father Samuel's proud nod, her brother Eli's clinging hug, still lingered, but the distant crack of gunfire from the sheriff's office pulled her back to the fight. Deputy Carl Hargrove, wounded but unyielding, was out there, a rogue force determined to silence her. The baggie of planted evidence was now with Deputy Ramirez, her proof against Hargrove's corruption, but Lila knew the battle wasn't over. Sarah, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand, her eyes fierce. "We're ending this tonight," she said, her voice steady. The young officer driving, Deputy Patel, glanced back through the rearview mirror. "Ramirez is holding the office, but Hargrove's got at least 2 men with him. We're heading to a safe point to rendezvous with backup." Her voice was calm, but her knuckles were white on the wheel. Lila's sprained ankle throbbed, a dull ache overshadowed by worry for Maria and Jake, still at the hunting cabin, fighting for their lives. "What about my friends?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Maria and Jake, are they safe?" Patel's eyes softened. "Units are en route to the cabin. Ramirez got your message. If they're holding out, we'll get them." Lila nodded, clinging to that hope, but Hargrove's face, twisted with rage as he fired from his cruiser, haunted her. He'd tracked her through the woods, the ranger station, and now Willow Creek. He wouldn't stop until she was silenced, or he was. She touched the nail file in her pocket, its rusted edge a reminder of her defiance at Maria's cabin. She wasn't the same girl he'd pulled over on that lonely highway. She was a fighter now. The car turned onto a quiet street, the sheriff's office a block away, its floodlights and flashing sirens visible through the drizzle. But before they reached it, a loud screech of tires shattered the night. A black SUV swerved in front of them, forcing Patel to slam on the brakes. Lila's heart lurched as Hargrove stepped out, his arm bandaged but his gun raised, flanked by Deputy Turner and another man, their faces cold and determined. "Out of the car!" Hargrove bellowed, his voice slurred but venomous. "You're not slipping away this time, Lila." Patel drew her gun, but Turner fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing. "Don't try it, Patel," Turner growled. "Hand her over, and no one gets hurt." Sarah shoved Lila down, shielding her. "Stay low," she whispered, her flashlight gripped like a weapon. Lila's mind raced. 3 against 3, but Hargrove's men were armed and desperate. The baggie was with Ramirez, but her presence was what Hargrove wanted. She was the key. Patel's voice was steady. "Hargrove, you're done. Ramirez has the evidence. Backup's coming. Stand down. Hargrove laughed, a chilling sound. You think a baggie's gonna stop me? I own this town. Now give me the girl, or I paint this street red. Lila's fear hardened into anger. He'd taken her freedom, her safety, her peace. No more. She whispered to Sarah, "We need a distraction. Can you get to the radio?" Sarah nodded, her eyes sharp. "Keep him talking," she murmured, slipping her hand toward the car's radio. Lila took a deep breath, her voice rising. "Hargrove, why me?" she called, peeking over the seat. "What did I ever do to you?" His eyes locked on her, glinting with malice. "You're a problem, girl," he snarled. "Always have been. People like you, thinking you're better, stirring up trouble. I'm just keeping order." "Order?" Lila shot back, her voice fierce. "You frame innocent people." "You killed Maria's brother. You're not a cop, you're a coward." Hargrove's face twisted, and he stepped closer, gun raised. "Big words for a dead girl," he said, but his voice shook, rage clouding his judgment. That was her opening. Sarah hit the radio, static crackling as she shouted, "Ramirez, now!" "Hargrove's at Elm Street." The sound startled Turner, who turned, and Patel seized the moment, firing at the SUV's tires. The vehicle sagged, and Hargrove roared, firing wildly. "Run!" Patel shouted, kicking open the door. Lila and Sarah scrambled out, diving behind a nearby mailbox as bullets sparked off the pavement. Patel returned fire, holding her ground. But Hargrove's men advanced, their flashlights cutting through the drizzle. Lila's heart pounded, her eyes scanning for escape. A narrow alley led toward the sheriff's office. She knew it from childhood, a shortcut to the library. "This way," she hissed, grabbing Sarah's arm. They sprinted, Lila's ankles screaming, the nail file bouncing in her pocket. Hargrove's shout followed them. "You can't run forever!" His boots pounded the pavement, closer than she'd hoped. The alley was dark, littered with trash cans, but it opened to the sheriff's office parking lot. Lila's hope surged. If they could reach Ramirez. Hand grabbed her jacket, yanking her back. Turner, his face a mask of fury, pinned her against the wall. "Got you," he growled, raising his gun. Lila's fear exploded into action. She drove the nail file into his hand, the rusted edge drawing blood. Turner howled, dropping the gun, and Sarah tackled him, sending him sprawling. "Keep going," Sarah shouted, wrestling Turner. Lila hesitated, torn, but Sarah's eyes were fierce. "Go!" Lila ran, bursting into the parking lot, the sheriff's office ablaze with light. Ramirez stood at the entrance, directing deputies, his face grim but focused. "Lila!" he called, rushing to her. "Where's Sarah?" In the alley, Lila gasped, her chest heaving. "Hargrove's men! They're right behind me!" Ramirez barked orders, and two deputies sprinted toward the alley. Lila's legs buckled, exhaustion crashing over her, but Ramirez caught her. "You're safe now," he said, his voice steady. "We've got the baggie, and we're searching Hargrove's office." "He's done." Lila shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Not yet." "He's out there, and Maria and Jake." A loud crash interrupted her, the black SUV smashing through the parking lot's gate. Hargrove leaned out, firing, his face a mask of desperation. Deputies scattered, returning fire, and Ramirez shoved Lila behind a patrol car. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his gun. Lila crouched, her heart in her throat, but she wasn't helpless. She spotted a deputy's radio on the ground, dropped in the chaos. She grabbed it, her fingers trembling, and tuned to the channel Sarah had used. "This is Lila Rose," she said, her voice clear. "Hargrove's at the sheriff's office. He's attacking. Send everyone." The radio crackled, a voice responding, "Units en route. Hold tight." Lila's hope surged, but Hargrove's gunfire was relentless, bullets pinging off cars. Ramirez fired back, his shots precise, and one caught Hargrove's shoulder, sending him slumping against the SUV's door. "Now!" Ramirez shouted, and deputies swarmed, surrounding the SUV. Hargrove raised his gun, his eyes wild, but a deputy tackled him, wrenching the weapon away. Turner, bloodied from the alley, was dragged out next, his hands cuffed. The third man surrendered, his hands raised. Lila's breath caught as Hargrove's eyes met hers, burning with hatred. "This ain't over," he snarled, but his voice was weak, blood soaking his shirt. The deputies cuffed him, dragging him toward a patrol car, and Lila felt a weight lift, though not entirely. Sarah stumbled into the lot, a bruise on her cheek, but alive. "You okay?" she asked, pulling Lila into a hug. Lila nodded, tears falling. "You saved me," she said, her voice breaking. "We saved each other," Sarah said, her smile weary but warm. Ramirez approached, his face etched with relief. "We got word from the cabin," he said. "Maria and Jake are alive. They're being brought in now. Hargrove's men there surrendered when they heard he was down." Lila's knees buckled, relief flooding her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. She thought of her family, waiting at home, and knew she'd see them soon. But first, she needed to see Maria and Jake, to know they were truly safe. As deputies secured the scene, a new siren wailed, an ambulance pulling into the lot. Lila watched as Hargrove was loaded onto a stretcher, his face pale but defiant. He'd lost, but his shadow lingered, a reminder of the fight she'd endured. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "You did it, Lila. You brought him down." Lila shook, her head, her eyes on the ambulance. "We did it," she said, thinking of Maria's courage, Jake's sacrifice, Sarah's loyalty, and her family's love. She was Lila Rose, and she'd faced the dark. Now she'd step into the light. Chapter 10. Home at last, the sheriff's office parking lot, was a chaos of flashing sirens and shouting deputies. But to Lila Rose, it was a battlefield won. Deputy Carl Hargrove, bloodied and cuffed, was loaded into an ambulance, his hateful glare meeting hers one last time before the doors slammed shut. The baggie of planted evidence, now in Deputy Ramirez's hands, was her triumph, proof of Hargrove's corruption that would unravel his reign over Willow Creek. But victory felt hollow as Lila stood in the drizzle, her heart heavy with worry. For Maria and Jake, still unaccounted for in the aftermath of the hunting cabin fight. Sarah's arm around her shoulders was a steady anchor, but Lila's thoughts were with her family, Grace, Samuel, and Eli, waiting at home, and the friends who'd risked everything for her. Deputy Ramirez approached, his face weary but resolute. "Lila, we've got Hargrove and his men in custody," he said, his voice steady. "The baggie's being processed, and we're raiding his office at the holding facility. You did good, better than good. You exposed him." Lila's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "What about Maria and Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You said units were sent to the cabin. Are they okay?" Ramirez nodded, a small smile breaking through. "They're on their way here. Maria's got a few bruises, but she's tough. Jake's wounded, bullet grazed to the arm, but he's stable. They held off Hargrove's men until backup arrived." Relief flooded Lila, her knees nearly buckling. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She turned to Sarah, who hugged her tightly, her own eyes glistening. "You're almost home," Sarah said, her voice warm. "Let's get you there." Deputy Patel, the young officer who'd driven them, gestured to a patrol car. "I'll take you to your family," she said, her kind eyes meeting Lila's. "Ramirez will handle things here." Lila nodded, exhaustion washing over her, but a spark of hope kept her moving. She climbed into the car with Sarah, the nail file still in her pocket, a reminder of the fighter she'd become. The streets of Willow Creek passed in a blur, familiar houses glowing under porch lights, a stark contrast to the nightmare she'd endured. As they neared her family's modest home, the porch light shone like a beacon, and Lila's heart swelled. The car stopped, and the front door flew open before Lila could step out. Grace, her mother, ran down the steps, her face streaked with tears. "Lila!" she cried, pulling her into a crushing embrace. Samuel followed, his strong arms enveloping them both, and Eli, her 9-year-old brother, clung to her waist, his sobs muffled against her jacket. "I'm here," Lila said, her voice breaking as she held them tight. "I'm home." Grace cupped Lila's face, her eyes searching. "We were so scared," she whispered. "When you didn't come home, we called everyone. Neighbors, the sheriff. We knew something was wrong." Samuel's voice was gruff with emotion. "You're our fighter, Lila. Always have been." Eli looked up, his eyes wide. "Did you beat the bad guy?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. Lila managed a smile, ruffling his hair. "We did, buddy. He's not hurting anyone anymore." Sarah stood back, giving them space, but Lila reached for her hand. "This is Sarah," she said. "She helped me get here, and there are others. Maria, Jake. They saved me." Grace pulled Sarah into a hug, her voice thick. "Thank you. You brought our girl back." Sarah smiled, her eyes misty. "She brought herself back. She's stronger than you know." As they stood on the porch, a new set of sirens approached, and Lila's heart leaped. An ambulance pulled up, followed by a patrol car. Maria stepped out first, her gray-streaked hair damp, a bruise on her cheek but her posture unbowed. Jake followed, his arm bandaged, his face pale but alive, his green eyes finding Lila's across the yard. "Lila!" Maria called, striding over and pulling her into a fierce hug. "You made it, child." Lila clung to her, tears falling. "You saved me, Maria. You and Jake." Jake approached, his smile weak but genuine. "You saved yourself," he said, his voice hoarse. "I just tried to keep up." Lila laughed through her tears, squeezing his hand. "You did more than that. You risked everything." Grace ushered everyone inside, the small living room filling with warmth. Samuel brought blankets, and Eli fetched water, his excitement bubbling. Over at the heroes in his house, Maria sat heavily, her eyes distant but proud, while Jake leaned against the wall, his wound making him wince. Ramirez arrived soon after, his face serious but hopeful. "Lila, we found more in Hargrove's office," he said, holding up a file. "Baggies, documents, even recordings. He's been framing people for years. With your evidence, we've got enough to bury him." Lila's heart soared, but a shadow lingered. "What about his men?" she asked. "Turner, the others, will they walk?" Ramirez shook his head. "Turner's talking, trying to save himself. The others are in custody. We're digging into everyone connected to Hargrove. This is bigger than Willow Creek. State investigators are getting involved." Maria's voice was sharp. "Good. My brother didn't get justice, but Lila will, and everyone else he hurt." Lila looked at her family, her new allies, Maria, Jake, Sarah, Ramirez, and felt a strength she hadn't known she had. "I want to make sure this never happens again," she said, her voice steady. "I'm going to school to be a teacher, but maybe I can do more. Speak out, help others." Grace's eyes shone with pride. "You will, baby. You already are." Jake met her gaze, a spark in his eyes that wasn't there before. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I'm done being scared. If you're fighting, I'm in." Lila's cheeks warmed, a flicker of something new, connection, maybe more, blooming between them. She nodded, her smile small but real. "Deal." The night stretched on, the house filled with stories. Maria's loss, Jake's guilt, Sarah's courage, Lila's survival. Ramirez promised to keep them updated, and as dawn broke, painting the sky pink, Lila stepped onto the porch, her family and friends inside. The air was crisp, the storm gone, and Willow Creek felt different, cleaner, like the rain had washed away more than mud. But a shock awaited. As Lila turned to go back inside, a folded note slipped from her jacket pocket. The One Amos had given her in the holding facility, its sketch of Hargrove's office faded but intact. She'd forgotten it in the chaos, but now, unfolding it, she found new words scrawled on the back. "Keep fighting, Lila. You're the light they can't snuff out. Amos." Lila's breath caught, tears welling. Amos, the quiet janitor, who'd risked everything to help her, was out there somewhere. His faith in her, a final gift. She tucked the note away, her resolve hardening. Hargrove was gone, but the fight for justice wasn't. She'd carry it forward, for Amos, for Maria's brother, for every soul Hargrove had broken. Inside, Eli's laughter rang out, and Grace called her for breakfast. Lila smiled, the weight of the night lifting. She was home, scarred but whole, surrounded by love. And as she stepped back into the warmth, Jake's eyes met hers again, a promise of tomorrow. Lila Rose was no longer just a girl. She was a force, and her story was just beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Lila testified against Hargrove, her voice steady as she recounted his crimes. The baggie, combined with the evidence from his office, led to his conviction, along with Turner and 3 others. State investigators uncovered a network of corruption, shaking Willow Creek to its core. Lila's story spread, first in local papers, then beyond, her courage inspiring others to come forward with their own tales of Hargrove's abuses. Maria became a mentor, her cabin a second home where Lila learned to heal through stories of resilience. Jake, recovering from his wound, left the force but stayed close, joining Lila in community meetings to advocate for change. Their bond grew, not quite love yet, but a partnership rooted in shared strength. Sarah, ever loyal, connected Lila with activists, amplifying her voice. Lila returned to college, her dream of teaching stronger than ever, but now with a new purpose: to educate, to empower, to ensure no one felt as powerless as she had that night on the highway. Her family stood by her, their love her foundation. And late at night, when doubts crept in, she'd read Amos's note, its words her guiding star. Willow Creek changed, slowly but surely, its wounds healing alongside Lila's. She'd faced the dark and come out stronger, a beacon for others. And as she walked the streets of her town, head high, she knew one thing for certain: she was Lila Rose, and she was home. Love stories like this? Hit like, share with others, and subscribe. For more